The gay bullfighter has something huge hidden. The crowd roared, the hot Spanish sun beating down on the golden sand of the arena. My chest heaved, my muscles tense, sweat dripping down my back beneath the tight traje de luces. The bull lay defeated, but the only thing I could feel was his gaze on me. Santiago Vargas, my rival, my obsession, the man who made my blood burn in ways I couldn't explain. Every time we stepped into the ring, the tension was electric, not just the thrill of the fight, but something deeper, something dangerous. He smirked at me from across the arena, his dark eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Desire? Challenge? Maybe both. And that was when I realized I wasn't the only one hiding something. Before we begin this scorching story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a single moment of passion and tension. Now, let's enter the arena. The heat was unbearable. Sweat trickled down my spine, soaking into the silk of my traje de luces. My chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, the roar of the crowd fading into a distant hum. The bull was down, its massive body still on the sand. The fight was over. I had won. But none of that mattered, because across the ring, Santiago Vargas was watching me. His gaze was dark, intense, burning into me like a challenge, like a promise. He was still gripping his capote, his golden outfit glistening under the sun, his chest heaving with the same adrenaline that pulsed through my veins. We had been rivals for years, two matadors battling for glory, respect, dominance. But lately, the fights between us had become something else, something dangerous. I saw it in the way his eyes lingered on me longer than they should, in the way our shoulders brushed in the locker room, neither of us pulling away, in the way my body reacted whenever I was close to him, a heat coiling in my stomach, tightening lower, a hunger I wasn't supposed to feel. Santiago smirked, tilting his head just slightly, a silent invitation. And I took it. That night, after the victory celebrations, after the alcohol had burned its way down my throat, I found myself standing outside his locker room door. My heart pounded, my fists clenched at my sides. I told myself I wasn't here for that. But when the door swung open, when Santiago stood there, still in his unbuttoned suit, his golden skin glistening with sweat, his smirk widening like he had been waiting for me, I knew I was lying to myself. He stepped aside without a word, letting me in, locking the door behind us. I barely had time to breathe before he was on me. A hand tangled in my hair, pulling me in. His mouth crashed against mine, rough, desperate, demanding. My back hit the lockers, the cold metal burning against my overheated skin. I gasped, and he took the opportunity to slide his tongue against mine, teasing, testing, pushing. I had fought bulls stronger than most men. I had stood in the face of death and never flinched. But Santiago? Santiago was the only thing I had ever truly feared. Because he made me want. His hands roamed my chest, fingers trailing down the intricate embroidery of my suit, undoing buttons, peeling fabric away inch by inch. His breath was hot against my neck, his voice a low whisper against my ear. I knew you'd come, I growled, gripping his waist, flipping us so he was the one against the lockers now. His eyes darkened with amusement. He loved the fight, loved making me lose control. My hands slid down his chest, feeling the hard ridges of muscle, the heat of his body. He was hard everywhere. Strong, dominant, irresistible. I should have stopped. I should have walked away. But instead I leaned in, my lips brushing against his jaw, my teeth grazing his skin as I whispered back, "Then you should have been ready for me." And just like that, the last bit of restraint snapped. Tonight, we wouldn't be rivals. Tonight, we'd be something else entirely. The door rattled as Santiago pressed me harder against the lockers, his hands gripping my waist, his breath hot against my skin. This wasn't a fight anymore, but it sure as hell felt like one. I should have stopped him. Should have stepped away. Should have reminded myself who we were. Rivals. Competitors. Matadors fighting for dominance in the arena. But here? Here, we were fighting for something else entirely. His lips were on my throat, grazing, teasing, his stubble scratching my skin in the best possible way. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, my fingers digging into his arms, solid, strong, trembling, with the same tension burning through me. I felt him smirk against my jaw. "You're not pushing me away," I growled, gripping the back of his neck, pulling him even closer. "Because I don't want to." That was all it took. His mouth crashed into mine again, rough, urgent, teeth and tongue and fire. My hands roamed down his chest, feeling every inch of firm, sculpted muscle beneath the golden embroidery of his traje de luces. Santiago was power, raw, unfiltered, and completely intoxicating. He backed me toward the benches, his hands working fast, unfastening my vest, pulling at the silk shirt beneath. I let out a low chuckle against his lips. "You in a hurry?" His dark eyes flashed as he pushed me down onto the wooden bench, hovering over me. "I've waited long enough." My breath caught. So had I. His fingers trailed down my stomach, exploring, teasing, setting my skin on fire. The dim lighting of the locker room made every sensation sharper, every touch electric. The scent of sweat, leather, and adrenaline mixed in the air. He was everywhere. His lips, his hands, his breath ghosting over my skin, leaving me restless, aching. This wasn't just a moment. It wasn't just lust. It was a storm, years in the making, finally breaking loose, and neither of us had any intention of stopping it. Santiago's hands were firm, demanding, his fingers trailing over my skin like he was memorizing every inch of me. My breath was uneven, my pulse wild, but I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. He hovered over me, eyes dark with something I couldn't name, something more than lust, more than competition. I had spent years watching him, studying his every move in the arena. But here, under the dim flickering lights of the locker room, he was something else entirely. He smirked, his fingers tracing the waistband of my trousers. "I always wondered how long it would take before you let yourself loose." I let out a rough breath, gripping the back of his neck, pulling him closer. "And I always wondered when you'd stop pretending you don't want this as much as I do." Santiago let out a low chuckle, but his smirk faltered, just for a second. And that was all I needed to know. This wasn't a game anymore. He wanted this, wanted me. He had wanted it for a long time. His lips crashed into mine again, hungrier this time, his body pressing against mine. The scent of sweat and leather mixed between us, the heat of his skin against mine sending a shiver down my spine. I shouldn't have let this happen. I should have stopped. But instead, I let Santiago push me deeper into whatever the hell this was. And for once, I didn't care if I won or lost. Santiago's breath was hot against my skin, his lips leaving a slow, burning trail along my jaw, down my throat. My fingers dug into his back, tracing the muscles I had spent years watching tense beneath his traje de luces. The same muscles that had made him my rival in the arena were now pressed against me, controlling me in a different kind of fight, one I didn't want to win. His hands roamed lower, pulling at my trousers, his grip firm, teasing, until I let out a ragged breath. He was toying with me, testing how far I would let him go, how much I would surrender. I wasn't the kind of man to yield easily, not in the ring, not in life. But with Santiago, it wasn't about losing or winning. It was about something raw, primal, and undeniable. I flipped him,
pushing him back against the cold metal lockers, pressing my body against his, my lips grazing his ear. "You talk too much," I murmured, my voice low, edged with something I didn't want to name. Santiago's breath hitched, but his smirk returned almost instantly. He loved this. Loved pushing me to my limit. Loved testing how much control I was willing to give up. I kissed him again, harder this time, my fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling, claiming, letting him know that whatever game we had been playing was over. This wasn't about rivalry anymore. This was something neither of us could take back. The heat between us built, our bodies moving in sync, like we were still in the ring, still reading each other's movements, still waiting for that perfect moment to strike. But there were no bulls here, no crowds, no tradition to uphold. Just us. And the way Santiago's body shuddered against mine told me he had been waiting for this just as long as I had. Santiago's breath was uneven, his body taut beneath my hands, his skin burning against mine. The tension between us was suffocating, a slow, intoxicating fire that had been waiting to ignite for far too long. His fingers traced my waist, slipping under the embroidered fabric of my traje de luces, teasing, testing. He was still playing the same game, still pushing the limits, still seeing how much control I was willing to give up. I had spent years fighting against him, competing, outperforming, trying to prove that I was the better man, the stronger matador, the one who deserved the spotlight. But here, in the dim, sweat-drenched locker room, with his body pressed against mine and our breaths tangled in the thick air, none of that mattered anymore. I shoved him back against the lockers, my grip firm, my lips grazing the sharp line of his jaw. He exhaled sharply, his fingers curling into the fabric of my suit. "You always have to be in control, don't you?" Santiago murmured, his voice low, edged with amusement. I smirked against his skin, my teeth grazing his throat. "You like it." His breath hitched, just for a second. But it was enough to know I was right. Santiago let out a soft chuckle, but it was strained now, his confidence faltering under my touch. I could feel the way his heartbeat pounded beneath my fingertips, how his body tensed like he was waiting, bracing, for me. I pressed my forehead against his, our noses brushing, our breaths mingling. This was different now. The teasing was gone, the challenge fading into something deeper, something real, something we couldn't take back. His hands slid up my back, gripping my shoulders, holding me there. Like he was afraid I would leave. Like he needed this just as much as I did. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Instead, I kissed him, slow this time, deliberate, letting him feel everything I had been holding back for far too long. Santiago melted into me, his fingers tangling in my hair, his breath shaky as he let himself fall. For once, there were no bulls, no roaring crowds, no rivalry. Just us, and the realization that we had spent years fighting a battle we had already lost. The locker room was silent except for our breaths, heavy and uneven, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Santiago's hands gripped my shoulders, his body still pressed between me and the cold metal lockers. His lips were swollen, his dark eyes searching mine, as if waiting for me to be the first to break. But I wasn't moving. I wasn't running. Neither was he. His fingers tightened around the fabric of my suit, holding me there like he wasn't ready to let go. Maybe he never was. Maybe this whole time, every glance, every fight, every arrogant smirk had been leading us here, to this moment. I swallowed hard, feeling the heat of him against me, the slow rise and fall of his chest matching mine. My mind screamed at me to say something,
to break the tension, but the words wouldn't come. Because what the hell could I say? That I had been wanting this for years? That every time I saw him in the arena, all I could think about was how badly I wanted to get under his skin in ways that had nothing to do with bullfighting? That I had spent too many nights alone, lying awake, imagining his hands on me the way they were now? No, I couldn't say any of that. But when Santiago finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, rough, edged with something almost like desperation. I knew. He felt it too. "This is fucking insane," he muttered, his breath ghosting against my lips. I smirked. "And yet, you're still here." His jaw tightened. His grip on me did too. "Yeah," he admitted. "I am." I didn't give him time to think about it. I crashed my mouth against his again, and this time there was no hesitation. It was hungry, urgent, teeth and tongue and years of pent-up tension finally breaking loose. He let out a sharp breath as my fingers dug into his waist, pulling him closer, pressing him harder against the lockers. I needed to feel him, to make sure this was real. Santiago growled against my lips, flipping me in one swift motion so that I was the one trapped against the cold metal now. His knee slid between my legs, his hands gripping my hips like he had been dying to do this for longer than he'd ever admit. "Still think you're in control?" he taunted, his lips brushing against my throat, making me shiver. I grinned, my fingers tightening in his hair, yanking his head back just enough to meet his eyes. "Try me." His pupils blew wide. And then, he did. It was a blur of movement, of heat, of hands pushing, gripping, tearing at fabric. Santiago's breath was ragged against my skin, his fingers digging into my back, my waist, my arms, claiming me in ways I didn't even know I wanted. And I gave it back to him. Every bit of frustration, of rivalry, of unspoken desire. Because this wasn't just about lust. It was about winning. Or at least, it had started that way. But as the locker room spun around us, as our bodies tangled together in ways they never had before, winning didn't seem to matter anymore. Santiago's breath hitched when I ran my hands down his chest, tracing every inch of him, memorizing the way his muscles tensed under my touch. He let out a quiet curse, his head dropping against my shoulder for just a second, a moment of weakness, and I loved it. I kissed his jaw, his neck, smirking against his skin. "Didn't think the great Santiago Vargas could be tamed." He chuckled darkly, his grip on me tightening. The air between us was thick, charged with something neither of us could name, something that had been growing for years, buried beneath our rivalry, beneath our need to one-up each other in the ring. But now there was no hiding from it. Santiago's forehead rested against mine, our breaths tangled, our bodies still pressed together against the cold lockers. His hands lingered on my waist, like he wasn't ready to let go, like he wasn't sure if he could. Neither was I. I had spent years trying to beat him, trying to prove I was better, stronger, faster, but here, in the dim light of the locker room, we weren't competitors anymore. We were just two men who had spent far too long denying something that had been inevitable from the start. Santiago let out a shaky breath, his grip tightening on my hips. "We can't tell anyone about this," I scoffed. "You think I don't know that?" His jaw clenched. "I'm serious, Torero." "I am too." I ran my fingers down his spine, feeling the way his body shuddered under my touch. But that doesn't change what just happened. His dark eyes locked onto mine, intense, conflicted. He was still fighting it, still trying to convince himself that this didn't mean anything, that we didn't mean anything. But we did, and he knew it. "Then what the hell does this mean?" he murmured. I swallowed hard. I had no damn clue. I wasn't the type to get caught up in emotions. I lived for the thrill, the rush, the high of victory. I fought bulls for a living, played with death like it was a game. Nothing scared me, except this, except him. Santiago searched my face, his hands still holding onto me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. Then, finally, he let out a slow, defeated breath and kissed me. This time, it wasn't rough or desperate. It wasn't a battle of dominance. It was something else, something neither of us was ready for, something real. I kissed him back, my fingers threading into his hair, pulling him closer, needing to feel him again, needing to remember this. Because no matter what happened next, no matter how much we tried to deny it, nothing between us would ever be the same. Santiago pulled away first, his lips still parted, his chest still heaving. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression unreadable. "We should go," he muttered. I exhaled, stepping back, the heat between us lingering. "Yeah." But as we grabbed our clothes, as we fixed our suits, as we walked out of the locker room separately, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Proximo qui faltum. Super curtus. Ushat GPT dis. The days passed, but nothing between us was the same. We fought harder in the ring. Our gazes lingered longer. Every touch, every glance, every challenge felt different now. At night, when I closed my eyes, I could still feel him, his breath, his hands, the weight of everything we refused to say. Santiago avoided talking about it, but he didn't stop wanting it. Neither did I. One evening, after another fight in the arena, I found him alone, leaning against the wall, sweat glistening on his skin. I stepped closer. He didn't move away. "You keep running," I murmured. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You keep chasing." I grabbed his collar, pulling him in. "And you love it." Santiago's breath hitched. Then, finally, he kissed me again. No more running, no more denying. This time, we weren't stopping.